It's Joel Tappan here, and I've been working with Craig Besinque on a combined module that brings all of the components of Triumph and Tragedy and Conquest and Consequences together into one single module. And what Craig had a vision for was one module that would incorporate the game pieces from both of his game designs that could be played together. And I took his idea and I took it a step further because he really wanted a module for TNT and a module for CNC, and he wanted them to both have the same kind of mechanics, and then there's a way that we could put them together and play them together. I said, how about we just make a master module? And so that's what we've done here. So when you get this module, it will play very similar to the Conquest and Consequences module I finished up last year. It'll be a little bit different than the TNT module. I was one of the guys that started that module, and a lot of other people got involved and then tinkered with it and did other things. And I think somebody might have even started over from scratch at one point. But what Craig wanted was for both modules to work exactly the same. So this module will incorporate all that together. Now, when you start a game, you get to the little splash screen here, and when you choose to start a new game and hit next, you're going to see there's 3 different setup options. Well, technically 4. New allows you to start something from scratch. ETO is just the Triumph and Tragedy, the European Theater of Operations. PTO is just going to be Conquest and Consequences, or just the Pacific Theater of Operations, and the combined game is the whole shebang. So let's sign in as ETO, and we'll set up Triumph and Tragedy. And I'm going to choose to sign in as Japan. Now, why would I do that? Because I'm an idiot. That's why. Okay. What happens if you sign in as somebody that doesn't play on that side of the map? Well, you'll end up having a map where you can access the Japanese force pool, and there's no blocks in there, and you can access the Japanese hand, but you can't draw any cards because there's no cards to draw on this map. So if you make that mistake, you just hit retire. Choose to sign in as, let's just choose the Axis, okay? We'll sign in as them, and bada bing, bada boom, there is our force pool, and there's all of our pieces. There's our hand window. All of it's working. Great. So that's how that will work and how you can resolve a mistake like that. When you first start the game, you'll notice that there's a lot of cadre markers on the board. They look like blocks, but they're really not blocks. If you right-click on one of these cadres, you can choose to transform that into a game piece from your force pool. There is no rules enforcement in the game. Now, if the force pool does not have a specific kind of game piece, it won't appear in this pop-up. Having said that, however, the pop-up doesn't keep track of how many of these things are in your force pool, nor does it enforce rules. So my assumption here is if you're smart enough to know how to play this game, then you're smart enough to know the rules to the game and know how it's supposed to be played. Your physical copy does not enforce the rules any more than this does, okay? So if we can live with that, we can live with this. Here's the deal. If I right-click on this guy, I could choose to put him in as a submarine, but that would make no sense because Munich is a landlocked territory. So let's be smart about this, and we'll make him, say, into an Air Force unit. You'll see an Air Force unit dispatches from my force pool, and it is flipped over. I am the owner of the block, so I can see it. You see right here, I can see the face of the block, and there's a little white border around it showing that it is revealed to me, but it's hidden to everyone else. So don't panic. No one else will be able to see that marker. If I right-click on him and choose to unhide him, or just select him and do a Control-H, you'll see that now he is revealed. To get rid of the move notation, you just click up on this button on the toolbar to get rid of your moves. Let's go ahead and make him hidden again. And let's take this other guy here and we'll make him, say, into a fort, the West Wall. So there you go. Now, let me show you another oddity that you can run into, and it won't happen with Germany, I think, as easily as it'll happen with, say, Italy. Let's go ahead and take this cadre in Milan and let's turn him into an aircraft carrier. And you'll see that there is 0 left in my force pool. But let's say I get really ambitious and say, hey, you know what? Let's turn them into an Air Force at sea kind of a power. Let's make another aircraft carrier. So I right-click on the other cadre and I choose to make him an aircraft carrier. And uh-oh, what happened? The cadre disappeared. What do I do? Well, this is where you panic and send an angry email off to Joel Tappan, or you get on Board Game Geek and complain about it, or you make a video about it, or you could just open up your force pool and select something appropriate, and you can just like move it down here, hide it, boom, problem solved. Another way you could solve the problem, and if you return it to the force pool, let me show you. If you click on markers, choose the theater that you're playing, choose blocks, I can take an Italian cadre, and I can do the same thing that route. So whichever is easier for you, depending on your screen size, one might be easier than another. So that's how you solve that problem if you make that mistake. So the point is, though, is to make sure that your block, if you're dragging from here, make sure you hide the block before you drag it on the map. That's the main thing. So that's pretty much how the module is going to work on the ETO side. Let me show you how to fill your hand windows. This works, I think, just like the other modules. If you want to draw an action card, you click on the left button, investment card on the right. So I can go boom, boom. Let's just do either, or, and either, and then we just flip the cards face up. Now, at the beginning of the game, you're going to need to draw twice as many cards as you normally would for the Axis. If you're playing in the PTO, the USA has the same kind of oddity. So what I recommend is you draw your first, 6, 7, you draw your first 7 cards, and then you go ahead and do another 7, and then you'll be all set. So that's how you can solve that issue. Around the perimeter of the map, if I am to zoom out here and fit the width, you'll see that there's a big gray area for playing your investment cards down here. Extra game pieces, particular to your side, are located near your tracks. So the Soviets are up here, or the USSR is up here, the West is up here, and so forth. Again, to get rid of trails and move notations, just hit on this button here and you'll be taken care of. If you click on the hand count, it'll tell you how many cards are being held by each player. Now this only says the Axis because we only drew cards into the Axis, but this is a way that you can keep track of who has how many cards. That's a useful thing in the module. Let me show you a few things about the Pacific. So let's go ahead and close this one out. And I'm going to open up the Pacific side. And this time I'm going to sign in as solo. And I'll show you a few things about the solo side. Let's go ahead and take the USA unit here in the Philippines. Let's make him into, probably makes sense to make him a fort. So let's go ahead and make him a fort. Now you notice because I'm signing in, whoops, I hit the wrong button. Let me get out of that. I signed in as solo, so you'll notice it didn't flip the block over like it does when you're in a multiplayer environment. And what you can do, if you right-click on the counter and you're signed in as solo, first of all, you have to examine your life choices. You're playing a block game by yourself. Okay, so let's just set that aside for a moment here. If you right-click on the block, you'll see that the hide option is grayed out. Okay, you can still do it though. You'll have to use your keyboard. Just left-click and do a Control-H. It's the same command, but now it flips over and it hides it to you, so you don't know it's there. And if you're old enough, you probably literally do not know what's there. But anyways, that's how you can handle that. Let me show you something cool about the buttons on the toolbar. Let's take these nationalist Chinese units, and I'm trying to separate them here. There we go. They're stuck together. The cadres, they like to stick together, and then the regular blocks don't. Okay, I got them separated. Let's go ahead and let's put an Air Force in here because I think those are cool. And let's put maybe a fort there, maybe some infantry, and maybe another fort. Okay, there's our nationalist Chinese. So clear the movement trails. Here's something you can do. Let me zoom out just a little bit so you can see the whole effect of this. If you click on the hide buttons up here on the toolbar, it'll hide all the pieces, particularly that side, provided that you're the owner of those blocks. Now, if you're signed in as solo, it'll let you hide any of them. So if I take, yeah, I think these guys will hide too. So if I go ahead and choose to hide the Soviets, which is just on the PTO side, notice the distinction between Soviets and USSR. There's a purple button for the PTO side. So if I hit that, it didn't hide the cadres because they're not technically blocks, but it did hide the Soviet-aligned Chinese communists. And if I do that for the USA, you'll notice it hid all of those. And if you hit it again, it'll reveal them all. Boom, boom. You can turn it on and off like a light switch. I believe that in a multiplayer environment, it only hides them. It does not globally unhide them. But it's kind of a cool feature when you're playing solo. In that lonely solo mode, I have made it just a little bit easier for you. So that's what's going on with that. By the way, I'm not making fun of you if you play solo. I play solo all the time. Sometimes it's hard to find opponents. But let's face it, it's a block game, so there are certain intrinsic challenges. Let me show you another cool thing, and to do this, I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to show you the combined game, because this is where this module is, I think, really cool. So for this, we'll go ahead and sign in as solo again, and now we're going to assign the zoom to fit the width, and you see here is the whole shebang. It's all there, so we can look at the Soviets on the PTO. Notice that they got square pips on them. That's another way that you can keep track of them so you don't accidentally, get things mixed up. Square pips are PTO, round pips are ETO. So everything is there. You can play both sides. Stuff can move from one map to another. I don't have the rules for that. It's something Craig's still working on, but feel free to, I guess, experiment until that's done. There are peace dividend markers. Now, these are going to be in the game regardless of what, if you're playing just ETO or PTO, make sure you draw on the dividends for the correct theater, because the force or the pool, the mix of dividends are particular to that theater. There's subtle differences. They're really close to being the same, but they're not exactly the same. So if you're a purist and you're just playing PTO, make sure you draw the ones that have the Balkan Troys. If you're playing just the PTO, make sure you draw the ones that have the rising sun. I figured those were the best ways to make that notation between ETO and PTO without making the counter look all gaudy. So that is how that works. Let me show you one last thing here. Turn marker, the turn order marker. If I right click on the turn order and set the turn order, if I choose that top option, it will roll the dice and it will move the marker to the appropriate side. This one here moved to space number 6. It's hard to see because I'm zoomed out so far, but it moved to number 6 and it did that on both theaters. So if I zoom in up here to the PTO, you can see it put it up there, and you can rotate it by doing the control brackets. Boom. You can just, decide which order you're going to go. Let's go that way. And over on the PTO, maybe you're going to go a different way. Where did you go? I think it is this one. Here it is. So maybe on PTO, we'll go this way. So that's kind of a cool feature. I mean, you don't have to do that. I mean, you can always drag the mark around and use a single die roll up here. I just thought it was cool to encode that into the turn order marker itself. So you just, again, right-click, choose turn order. Doesn't matter which side if you're playing the combined game, it doesn't matter which side you use that on. It'll move both markers. And I believe that is everything you need to know to use the module. Everything else should be fairly self-explanatory. Remember, right-click is your buddy, and pay attention to your force pools, and especially when you got a side like the Nationalist Chinese, they don't have access to everything that the other sides do, and they have a limited supply of things in their mix. Actually, these are the French. The Nationalist Chinese are in here. So you'll see the Nationalist Chinese, they don't have, a fleet and all of that. They only have a couple Air Force units, a couple tanks, few pieces of infantry, lots of militia, and so forth. The game pieces, or the markers, I should say, up in the markers tray, that's where you find your forts, by the way. Your turn order block for marking whose current turn it is. So maybe I want to put this on here. Let me move this over here. I'll put the current turn near the USSR, and that's something you'll be passing around the map. Remember to grab one for both sides, the ETO and the PTO, because the arrows are slightly different. So it's got red, green, and kind of that burnt yellow. That's for the PTO side. And then the ETO has the red, blue, and the gray. So that is where you find those pieces. That's where you find your cadres, your fortress blocks. And there is a difference in those fortress blocks. They're up to 3 pips on the ETO side, only 2 pips on the PTO side. And all of your markers are also in both So there is all of your instructions on how to play the master module for Conquest and Consequences, Triumph and Tragedy. If you want to play it combined or separately, the whole shebang is here. If you've been playing Conquest and Consequences, there's very little changes between this module and the CNC module that you may have been already using. I think the only thing that's actually new is the right click on the turn mark, the automation I encoded in that. I think that's the only thing that's new. Everything else I think is already in the module. So in terms of file size, it's not that big of a module to combine the whole thing, but it might be convenient for you to use the new combined module. And so we're going to put that out there this weekend. Hope you enjoy that. Hope you enjoy the video. If you enjoy this kind of content, I ask that you subscribe to my channel, like it on YouTube, and we'll be putting out more content as we go. Sometimes I have VASSAL stuff. Sometimes I have what I'm playing on my tabletop. For example, right now I've been playing Almoravid by GMT Games. And I don't just play GMT stuff. I do play other games from other companies, but I do have a lot of GMT products that have been unplayed, so I'm hoping to get some of those on the table soon. At any rate, I do appreciate my subscribers. Y'all have a wonderful day. Enjoy the module.